My name is Carolina Are. I'm based at City University of London at the moment. I'll tell you a bit about me before we start, just to kind of give you a bit of a picture of how this weird research that I'm doing came into being. Just before we start, show of hands, has any of you been trolled at all? Okay, fair enough. Has any of you kind of self-censored on social media for fear of being trolled? Okay, right. What a nice world we live in. So just to start, in my background, I have a BA in journalism from the university I'm currently studying at. Then I decided that I was done with academia and went into PR, so I have about a 5-year PR experience. But then I had burnout and I thought that PR was kind of bullshit, so I went back into academia again. And I got a master's in criminology from the University of Sydney in Australia. On top of that, I do a bit of blogging on the side, freelance journalism, and I use social media a lot. So I'm kind of I'm in this really unique position to research on weird social media stuff because of my personal, professional, and academic background. Just to give you the heads up, this could go two ways, I think. You could either think, duh, after hearing my presentation, which I'm hoping you will say, because I think it kind of means that the world is developing a bit, or you will say that I'm totally crazy. But I welcome any of your responses, and I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. If I say anything weird that you don't understand during the presentation, feel free to point that out to me. I'm happy to explain. But for anything else, if that's okay, I'd like to keep the questions at the end so that maybe we can have a bit of a debate after I'm done. You're very welcome to tweet this, hashtag this, whatever you want. My Twitter handle is up there, but if you're not a Twitter person, that's not a problem. If you guys have presented and you find yourself spammed by that account, it's me. I was probably live tweeting your talk. It's your case. Sorry. Right, so what is flaming? Flaming is not trolling, as this headline says. So what I found is that a lot of research that is focusing on social media harassment at the moment, which is what flaming is, social media harassment, is focusing on a really kind of psychological aspect of whoever does it. So they think they're psychopaths, they think they're wrong in the head for doing whatever it is that they do. But what I've also found is that academia and the media at the moment are really confusing what trolling is with what flaming is. So flaming means posting threats on social media, commenting on stuff with sexually or racially charged slurs. It's often a repeated and group-led abuse of a bunch of people that are attacking one target for whatever it is that they're doing. It often affects protected categories, so people that are protected by anti-discrimination and equality laws, so that would mean women, it would mean racial minorities, religious minorities, the LGBTQ+, a bunch of people that are often victims of online slurs anyway. It goes beyond the mere conversation disruption. So I think we all know pretty much what a troll is, and considering what you've said, you've probably been trolled once or you've seen it happening. It's the annoying person on Twitter that just goes on telling you you're fat, you're ugly, you've got no place talking about whatever you're talking about. They're trying to disrupt whatever it is that you're saying. It's annoying, it's disruptive, it's dumb, but it's hardly criminal. Flaming, however, because of what I've just said, is actually criminal. Because if you go up on the street and talk to someone and just say, I don't know, like, I'm gonna rape you, you're probably gonna get done for it. But if you do it online, strangely enough, we're still trying to catch up with what is happening. We're still trying to catch up with what we should do about it. For this reason, because flaming has been confused with trolling so much, it's been deemed a moral panic by the media. So many, and not only by the media, but by academics as well. So many people are saying that it's not worth researching, or that millennials are snowflakes and they get too worried about stuff and they should start to take everything that they're getting. So my focus in my research at the moment, so I'm doing a PhD at City University, is to, instead of looking at the psychology of flame trolls, who we don't get to talk to anyway because their accounts are often anonymous, I want to focus on the content that they post that is immediately available to us on public social network, to show that flaming is not a moral panic and that it's an important issue that sees freedom of expression, our right to freedom of expression against the right to live without harassment. So two clashing rights that are essential in our world and that are now being translated to social media. So just to give you a bit of background of my paper, as I said, my PhD is in flaming. I'm trying to look at a particular flaming case study to use discourse analysis and qualitative research methods to kind of understand how flame trolls think, what brings them to do what they do, and what we can understand from the content they post about them. So I'm trying to take a criminological approach and look at the crime, so the flame troll instead, so flaming instead of at the criminal flame trolls. So that is the PhD. But this paper that I'm using now originates from my master's, born at the University of Sydney as my dissertation. I wanted to do what I'm doing now with my PhD. So I wanted to look at a case study of flame trolling and kind of do a discourse analysis and see what that was all about. But the ethics committee at the university wasn't too keen on that because they were kind of like, but you were looking at social media data online. Like, that's people's stuff. Like, that's private. You shouldn't do that. You've only got 6 months. You're never going to get ethical approval for that. So this is why I decided to write this paper. I was recommended not to research on this type of online material as I was never going to get approval. And that got me thinking about the challenges of studying this type of behavior. And the challenges that I've identified mainly are two. There are many, but the most kind of obvious ones are two. And they are political. So we're talking about censorship against freedom of expression. And we're also looking at when flaming becomes a concern for the criminal justice system. When does it become punishable? And then we're looking at ethics. So obviously, when we do research as academics, we're looking at privacy. We're looking at making sure that people that consent to our research are doing it so willingly and knowing what it is that they're kind of facing. So we're looking at privacy and informed consent, and we're looking at conducting research on digital data without endangering participants or infringing their rights. This is all well and good for normal research that involves human participants. This is not all well and good for digital data. It's still confusing quite a lot of people. But as criminologists and academics in general, we are realizing that a lot of crime is happening on social media, and that crime is it's kind of happening in public. We're all watching. We don't know what to do about it. So it's kind of time that we look at it as, you know, not only on a legal under a legal perspective, but also under an academic perspective. So I'll start with the political challenges. The issues that we've got here are the ones that I've precisely written. So because social media and social media companies are kind of viewed as a bit of a big brother situation, we don't want them to censor whatever it is that we're saying, and we don't want the state, or we don't want companies in general, people in power, to censor what we're saying. We don't want to be controlled that way. However, one aspect of social media that we hadn't considered is that it's actually upsetting a lot of people. It's resulting in crime. And but the issue is that just like every other type of crime, or just like many other social situations, some people get more upset than others. So how do we strike the balance? How do we realize what becomes criminal and what isn't? And we know that censorship is undemocratic. We don't want censorship to happen. I'm not advocating for censorship, FYI. Please don't blame me for that. But also, as DM has said, allowing a free-for-all on speech is undemocratic too, because it's preventing us from protecting a certain category of the population, and that's the category that gets harassed. So I thought that an interesting way of kind of striking that balance was to look at international law and human rights in general. So the Universal Declaration for Human Rights could initially appear pro-flaming, because it says that everybody has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, and this right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. So technically, freedom of information and expression is paramount for the post-World War II world that we know. However, international law in general has been covering this too. So in terms of what the Council of Europe has said, there have been cases in Europe where people published political speech and views that offended or shocked or disturbed others. There is this case which cracked me up quite a lot when I was studying media law at uni. Pretty much there's this Austrian politician that was very far right, and he was accused of being a Nazi by many people in the press. Then this other journalist turns up and says that he's not a Nazi, he's an idiot. This journalist got sued for defamation. The guy didn't mind about being called a Nazi, but God forbid that he was called an idiot. So obviously the journalist got sued for defamation, but what happened was that once he appealed, he was told that he was right, that he has the right to publish opinions that may offend, shock, or disturb others. And as I've just said, there's also the issue in there that, yes, we have a right to publish information that isn't exactly politically correct, because that's public debate, because that's how a democratic society is born. And we don't want social media providers to control what we said, because as we've seen with Cambridge Analytica and all the scandals post-Brexit, post-Trump elections, the way social media providers and companies can interfere with our public and democratic life can be quite scary. So we don't want to go there. We don't even want to touch a Big Brother type society. We don't even want to risk that. We're living in a period of terrible uncertainty because of this. Many victims are not even coming forward with their fears of having been harassed online. And those that are coming forward are sometimes being told by the police and by the government, why don't you get offline then? Because it's easy, because we don't live our social lives online, we don't date online, we don't speak to family and friends online. Who needs social media anyway? Or any other type of media, because when you are a target of flame trolls, chances are that they will not stop at Twitter. If you are easily searchable, they will probably find you better than Liam Neeson, they will find your email address, they will, I don't know, like hack your profile. So it's not just a matter of getting off those profiles. The issue is also that neither social media users, so us, or the law, are equipped to deal with internet freedom of expression at its worst. Because, as we were saying before in other talks, social media advancements and technological advancements go so fast that the law hasn't caught up with them. However, now, comments that one would have made in passing leave a permanent record online. It's not just media organizations that are publishers now. Technically, we are publishers too. Whatever we say leaves a mark and it stays there. That's why at uni, we were kind of bullied into creating weird, fake social media accounts so that employers wouldn't Google us and find our, I don't know, like Marbella topless pictures. But it happens. Like now, especially young people are terribly conscious of what they're doing online, because everything leaves a mark, everything leaves a record. And the growth of social media has forced the law to apply guidelines that were not designed to suit them. Regulations that are there might have been appropriate 10 years ago, but they might not be appropriate now. They might not be effective enough. They might not keep everything, they might not consider every issue at play. So it's paramount that we strike a balance between the gravity of what's being published and freedom of expression. And to do that, I decided to use international law and cases that have been kind of researched in the past to show that there is a possibility to strike a balance. We can do it as researchers, the state can do it. And I think in this case, as Emma Jane has said, she's one of the people that has written about flaming the most. When it comes to freedom of expression, we need to strike a balance and think whether victims' safety and rights to live without harassment is more important than censorship in this case. because there are two clashing rights, as I mentioned before. So there's this preamble in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that said that we need a world where we are free from fear. So we can't have these two rights living together if we're not prepared to balance them. As the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights says, freedom of expression can be regulated for respect of the rights and reputations of others, and also to protect national security or public health or morals. We're not looking at national security most of the time, but we are looking at the respect and rights of and reputations of others. We are looking at people whose lives are being ruined because some guy on 4chan has decided to publish some horrible pictures that are not even true on their profiles. And these people can't find a job, they can't speak to their family. It's becoming a real harassment issue. It's like blackmail, but online. So we need a way to change this. We need a way to strike this balance. People's social media posts now constitute publications because they can easily be retrieved. But case law related to freedom of expression generally only concerns press freedom trials. It's not being applied to social media right now. And regulators now need to take human rights law and international law into account. And as someone was saying before in another talk, it's essential that we as citizens, but also the media, also social media companies, also the authorities, work together to find a way to balance all these issues. So I am going to talk about one way that the UK is thinking to regulate this space. I don't necessarily agree with it, but they found out that they had to do something, that the media were campaigning against social media harassment and all that. And what does the government do? They can't just sit there and wait for things to change. They need to do something. What they decided to do was a social media code of practice. This means that there will be an annual Internet Safety Transparency Report. They will support tech startups to build internet safety into their products from the beginning. And they will also ask social media companies to sign up for this code of practice voluntarily. So they will be asked to kind of look after their users better, to prevent harassment and all of that. The issue is that this is voluntary. So tech companies are companies. They need to make money, and they thrive off that data. They sell that data off to people. Will they agree to this code of practice? I don't know if you guys are familiar with the phone hacking scandal of 2011 and before, but in the UK, it turned out that a lot of newspapers were hacking into people's private voicemails to get a story. And there was this press complaints commission thing that was created a while before that was meant to kind of look after people's rights. And the press, every newspaper was meant to sign up for that so that they would all agree on a code of practice. Then the tabloids decided not to sign up, and then it turned out that they were hacking phones. So I see that situation kind of being repeated over here. I don't think all social media companies will want to sign up. And as we've seen with the case of Alex Jones, his comments have been banned from Facebook and from YouTube, but Twitter has decided not to, which is why I'm also looking at Twitter in my PhD, because I feel it's the place where trolling happens the most. Facebook and Instagram are being very careful with whatever it is that they publish. It's kind of a game of whack-a-mole. Everybody that annoys somebody, even if they publish a video with music that wasn't credited, even if it's a dance video, they just ban it. While on Twitter, it's kind of a free speech, free for all. It's a social network with a trolling problem. So I guess the answer for my political challenges is that we need to strike a balance. The law is there. If with the law, and if governments are trying to find a balance, to strike a balance, we can do it as academics as well. We don't need to be afraid to say that we're advocating for censorship, because realistically, we're not advocating for censorship. We're just advocating for reasonableness. Now, with ethical challenges, this is the bit that probably affects us the most when we're doing research as criminologists. So what has been found in a variety of studies was that a growing number of research proposals using social media data and social media research are being submitted to a variety of universities. However, few academics reviewing them claim to have received any formal training in marking them or indeed in reviewing them. And this is throwing a lot of people into a bit of a panic. it turns out that as academics, we're not really fully prepared to study digital data ethically and successfully. And a lot has been written about it. A lot has been written about potentially ethic social media methods, social media research methods. But research still has to agree upon a widely accepted ethical social media research process, which kind of resulted in me not getting any ethical approval for my paper and doing like a literature review made of rants about why it shouldn't have happened. So in terms of social media research methods, for researching flame trolls, we seem to lack them. We don't have any. We don't want to look at digital data. We are afraid of it. However, in terms of flame trolling, as I mentioned before, their posts and profiles are often the only information we have about them, because their accounts are anonymous, because they don't want to be recognized, so they use fake profile pictures, they use fake bios, they use fake everything. And when they're interviewed by researchers, they troll them. There have been so many cases of researchers trying to interact with social media trolls and then being trolled massively. I've seen so many YouTube videos of researchers being trolled by some random dudes that I'm really tired of them, and I'm actually really scared of publishing my research now, because next year, little did you know, it will be me. But I guess I've got to deal with it. So as Jane said, we need a blend of social media research. So they need to be probably qualitative and quantitative. Well, you got it, sorry. I'm jet lagged. But anyway, you know what I mean? We need a blend of those two methods, because the current social media research methods that we have are quite rigid. They apply to the 70s maybe, when we didn't have any social media. But now that the data is there, we need a way to deal with it and to research it. Social media makes our life very difficult, not just as researchers, but as human beings. Sometimes we're not able to interpret what people are saying online. We're not able to see if they're joking or if they're willingly hurting us. And they blur the boundaries between presence and absence, time and space, control and freedom, as this Bain and Boyd post says. We don't understand, so the patterns that are being played online, yes, they mimic real life, but they're not always like real life. It's almost like we've got a panel removing us from the person's feelings, which is why it's essential that we start researching on this digital data. As I said before, flame trolls do not make reliable interviews, which is why we need to use their content. And content can say a variety of things that if you consider, so for instance, if you look at when posts are published, if they're published after 6, it means that the person has a normal job in a real life. If they're published at 1 in the morning, it either means that that person lives in a different country and does that for a living, or that they've just gone drunk and they've gone on a tirade insulting people. So already those patterns are telling us a lot. Even the language that these people use, the pictures that they're using, it's telling us a lot that interviewing them or interacting with them, obtaining informed consent from them would probably not tell us. Plus, flaming is a performance. It's a performance with real consequences, because obviously people get hurt. But if these people are using fake social media accounts, there is a chance that they're not genuine at all and that they are acting out for us. So the data that we would be analyzing by interviewing them and interacting with them would probably not be reliable at all. Which is why, as I said, we need to analyze the posts containing the flame bait or the e-bile, which is what all that type of offensive language is called at the moment. But academics are obviously concerned about this type of information. So we need new skills and methods of analysis to interpret findings. We are worried about social media platforms that are technically used for private discourse most of the time. And we're worried about privacy and informed consent. We are worried about publishing whatever a person says in an academic paper that might then make the news. And we are worried about not asking participants to take part in our research, even though we're just using their data indirectly. It kind of goes against what research was or used to be. And we're worried about ownership and authorship of data. Obviously, you are the author of that tweet. Technically, you owe the copyright, even if you've posted it on social media. So these are all the concerns that academia is having at the moment. Plus, is the data even reliable? And I guess that means it just depends on the way you analyze data. If you're looking at numbers, if you're looking at people's opinions, or if you're looking at their quotes about things that have happened, they might not be reliable. But the way this data is being shared, the type of speech that we see, that tells us a lot as sociologists and as criminologists about a behavior rather than a tendency or, again, numbers and statistics. So privacy and informed consent are what I've decided to focus on because those are the main concerns for academics at the moment, according to a variety of reports and a study by Vogt and others. However, is privacy a thing in our world, especially on social media? Privacy can involve a variety of factors. It can involve location, time. It can involve even just not having your picture published next to your username. Most social networks' legal terms and conditions, however, are already at odds with the concept of anonymity and are not private at all. So some social networks allow you to go private, but most of them actually privilege you going public because then your posts will be seen more, you will get more likes. And who doesn't like likes? Everybody wants to have an audience on social media, everybody wants to be an influencer, or they're there to lurk. It's either or. But again, like the concept of privacy is kind of at odds with social media in general, and actually Twitter's terms say that if you want to publish tweets, technically they have to be verbatim. You have to publish the picture and the username of the person that has posted them. So technically, even using tweets without publishing them completely is against Twitter's terms and conditions. In terms of informed consent, we know as academics that all participants should have given informed and voluntary consent about joining a research. Participants should understand what is expected of them after receiving adequate and sufficient information about the research they're taking part in. But obtaining informed consent online, it's different from doing so in person. So if you're signing up for a survey and then ticking, yeah, I agree with the terms and conditions, have you really read them? Have you understood them completely? I myself often skim the terms and conditions and then find myself flooded by emails. So this is what might be happening to participants themselves. Plus, agreeing to the conditions, when you try to analyze, let's say, 500 tweets by 500 different users, it's actually quite impractical to go to each and every one of these users and ask them for consent, especially if they're publishing something that shouldn't be out there, because technically it could be a crime, or because it's insulting, or because it makes them look like a horrible person. So I thought it would be interesting to see what social media users themselves feel about privacy and informed consent and their data being used for research. And in a study by Sloan and Quan Hayes, users said that they are worried about their data being used for purposes they did not agree with or in situations lacking consent. They're afraid of having their name and username published next to their picture and next to something they just published that might not be 100% kosher. They felt powerless about the ownership of their data because obviously once you put something out there, it's out there. You can't retrieve it anymore. Twitter owns it. But the type of social network that they use, that a researcher would use to collect data and to collect users' thoughts and stuff, influenced the way users thought about that data collection. So if a researcher used Facebook, they might not be 100% okay with it, because Facebook is still seen as a network where you only speak to your friends and family. To read whatever a person writes on Facebook, you have to add them as a friend first, unless their profile is public. However, for LinkedIn, which kind of looks like an online CV, it's public anyway. It's meant to be public because you want employers to find you. And for Twitter as well, if your profile is public, whatever, there's nothing you can do. So users are not that bothered about data being collected from those social networks. Plus, users who've self-regulated online were less likely to express this opinion. So if you kind of held back from publishing the whole of your life and whatever you're doing, you were not that concerned about that data being taken, because whatever is on social media is not something you're worried about, is not something you want to hide. So what these users said was that if a social network or profile is public, they're not bothered about researchers asking for permission or not. How am I doing with time, by the way? Don't want to go over. Right, so I thought we could look at a relevant court case in this situation. So this is a US case, actually. There was a person that I believe didn't go to work, but then they were fired because their employer looked at their Facebook and they saw that they were doing other stuff. And this person sued the employer for privacy reasons, but the court found that they had no reasonable expectation of privacy because they had published it all over Facebook. So social networks are meant for things to be seen, for things to be public. So if you don't want your employer to know and you're friends with them, you don't publish. There's a standard of reasonableness that I'm using there. And I'm using this to use and publish the data that I find. So the standard of reasonableness involves both the victim and the offender. So if, as a victim, you, as a reasonable person, would feel offended or threatened by a certain post, then you are being reasonable. Same, as an offender, if you know that whatever you say can be offensive to someone, then you are being unreasonable. Therefore, that communication is worth publishing because it's breaching that standard of reasonableness that is used legally. Going towards a possible ethics framework, I thought we could have two options, which is, this one is technically at odds with Twitter's terms. So maybe I will get sued. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But I've obtained ethical approval for this by my university's ethics committee. So technically, I'm covered, and they'll take the blame, I hope. But what I thought we could do was to publish a user's username next to the content they posted, but we would blur their profile picture if it showed a human face, because many of these people actually have Tweety or some, I don't know, rabbit as a profile picture and not a human profile picture. And we could also blur the last few letters of their name if, again, this name is public to prevent identification. And then if anything on that profile leads me to think that that user is underage, I would blur everything and I would just keep the content. The content of the post and the time this way is still there, and we can still use it and we can still analyze it. Plus, the authorship issue is dealt with, because I'm not taking any responsibility for, or I'm not saying that I'm the author of that post. We have the author right next to the post. And then, yes, so this is a bit tricky. It would need a great deal of care to prevent identification, which is why I would want to do this with some form of inter-rater reliability or with some form of collaboration, so that it's not just me making this method up and saying that I'm right. And then, as I said before, I would only use public information on a public profile on a public social network. Journalists already do it. They embed tweets and articles and quotes. So why can't we do it as academics? It's impractical, as I said, to obtain informed consent in this situation because there are so many people publishing and because they don't want their content to be analyzed in a legal way because they're probably feeling already kind of worried about it, and it would be counterproductive. As I said before, we can use them if they've been made public. Plus, Twitter itself and Instagram and all social networks that are public and that use sharing settings and hashtag settings are already meant to increase views. If you use a hashtag, it means that you want your post to be seen while, like, with other posts with that hashtag. So technically, you're hoping for us to find that post, and you reasonably have no expectation of privacy. Plus, as I said before, the necessity to understand these users overrides the issue of informed consent. Obviously, there are issues with this approach. There is no standard definition of trolling and flaming yet, which means that victims are confused about reporting it, the authorities are confused about how to punish it, and it's a murky area of research because there's a lot of trial error involved still. Plus, defining trolling and flaming and using existing legislation and applying it can still result in a subjective analysis, because I, a woman from, like, with my background and, you know, knowledge about this issue, might feel more sensitive about this than someone else who isn't sensitive to this issue or has maybe not experienced trolling in the past. Plus, researching on written content itself is subject to interpretation, and it becomes even worse with social media without the mediation or, like, the appearance of a human face and seeing if they actually mean what they're saying. So I'm hoping to use the British Sociological Association's ethical guidelines for content analysis and inter-rater reliability to sort of prevent this problem from happening or minimize it. So just as a summary, I described the political and ethical challenges faced by criminologists and sociologists in studying this content. I suggested a working framework for criminology to meet these challenges. So we've got, as I said, two clashing rights, freedom of expression and right not to be harassed online. So if we use case law and international law and human rights, hopefully we will come to an agreement on what's valuable for research or not, and what can be published or not. And we need social media companies, governments, and the criminal justice system to work together to regulate the space. And then in terms of long-established academic ethics and social media, flame trolls intend their posts to be seen, and therefore we need to analyze them. We need to understand what moves them, and we need to understand what it is that makes a flame troll to then punish this type of behavior. Because right now, the definition of flaming is kind of really, really high on the Big Brother scale of everybody monitoring whatever we're saying, or it's too laissez-faire. So we need a balance. And then we need to take platform settings into account to establish if users have a right to privacy and informed consent. And we need to consider blurring the pictures and names to prevent identification and still study the content that these users publish. And that's it. This is my bibliography, and I'm done. Any questions?
I deal with text all the time. I don't need a writer's permission to write about what that person says. So it seems to me there's a couple. So if we define Twitter as private, right? When I write a text for my, my college owns that text. I'm aware of that, right? And so that, be careful what you say in an email. Excuse me, in an email. But if I post something publicly, obviously it's a public gesture, and it should be read as a text. A written text of a type. And if I post it privately to an individual, why doesn't the individual whose page that is have ownership then over that content?
Well, I mean, this makes sense, right?
Well, I'm kind of. Why isn't this just fair use? Why would you need anyone's permission to use what they have said to you?
Well, you see.
If I said it in person, wouldn't you have fair use to say this is what that person said at this point in time and write about that?
Well, the thing is, I agree with you. It's this is why I'm saying the outcome could be duh, of course. But that being said, it's not what's happening online, because some people, especially I'm talking about like ethics committee and stuff like that, still view social media communications as private communication, even if it's on a public profile. And they are still having problems with these posts being used. And I don't agree with that. And I think we should be using them because, as we said, they are open source. If your profile is public, it's out there.
Right. I guess my question, maybe this is the difference between Britain and American, because I don't understand why I would have to go to an ethics board for that at all. Like I don't, for my work, I never have to go to an ethics board in any way whatsoever.
Well, I mean, I'm talking about research within universities, and I'm talking for
right. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, I don't know. Like it happens in the UK.
And is it disciplinary because you're coming out of sociological, or I come out of literature and humanities, and maybe that.
I think that's it, because the issue is that when you are doing especially sociological or psychological research, there's always this fear of harming participants, and this fear of harming participants not making your research valuable because you have misbehaved.
Right.
So this is why then, for instance, my university would never approve my my study if I hadn't taken this into account, if I hadn't provided reasons for that.
Could you write about a novel published in 1920? I mean, this is what I don't understand by participants. They're not actually participants. What you're studying is the written text, right? And so I don't understand how they're distinguishing between something written a long time ago, but that person isn't alive, or even if the person is, but looking at the thing, that it's not actually a statement even about that person. It's about the speech act or the written act that shows up on that.
I completely agree with you, which is why I'm happy that I obtained ethical approval, but that wasn't the case in my other university, because there is this worry about social media content and about people that post it and about whatever could happen to those people. And I would say maybe universities' concerns is that if you publish something that someone else has published that could put them into trouble, technically then you're responsible for that happening. And even if it's illegal, apparently it's not okay as, you know, as a form of research. This is what I've been told. This is why, like, I've had to create like this massive case for published content that is out there for free, showing us that something that is not okay is happening, can be used and should be used. And this is why so many researchers have argued that the way that we look at digital data is rigid and obsolete. I mean, personally, again, like in my head, when I was told that I couldn't do that research, I was like, oh, why? It's there.
Right.
They've signed up to the terms and conditions. They're using hashtags. They want their stuff to be seen.
Yeah.
But that was not the ethics board's view, which is why, you know, we need to kind of update the way that we do research in a way. Any other questions?